The views and opinions expressed on the show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and or their affiliate and supported ministries and or nonprofits.
Hello and welcome to chapter 5 of the book of Proverbs. We're going to begin in verse 6 of that chapter. So let's begin. It says, "My son, attend to my wisdom. Bow down your ear to my understanding, that you may regard discretion and that your lips will keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, and her steps take hold on hell." And now here's the final point. "Lest you should ponder the path of life, her ways are movable, that you cannot know them." So this woman's path was described as movable. It shifted from one direction to the next. And that's the topic that I want to zero in on today, movable. So the word movable, the literal definition of it, has, I want to read a few of the other words. It means to wander, to quiver, waver, tremble, to totter, unstable. In Job, the same word was translated to swing to and fro. In Isaiah, it was translated to stagger. And in Lamentations, it was also translated as wandered. So the movability that is spoken of here in this verse in Proverbs is not talking about being yielding to others, as in to be a peacemaker. It's not talking about an occasional misstep or mistake. It's not talking about being confused about what action to take in a choice that you have to make. Those are all uniquely individual topics that are worthy of discussion, but they're not what this verse is talking about. The movability that is spoken of here in this verse is explained literally in the text. It's talking about lest you should ponder the path of life. So the movability is regarding the path of life that this person is on. And we know there are two roads, one broad and one straight and narrow. So very quickly, I want to explain in a very broad using a very broad brush, 3 basic compasses that people tend to choose from as the compass to direct their life. And the first one is moral relativism, the second is situational ethics, and the third is absolutism. Now, moral relativism is the first one, and that is the view that moral judgments are true or false only relative to some particular standpoint. For instance, whether it's the culture or the historical time period. And that no standpoint is privileged over others. I saw this play out in, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the debate that happened between Bill Nye and Ken Ham a number of years ago. But it was either before or after, I don't remember the debate, that Ken Ham gave Bill Nye a tour of the Ark Encounter. And I've been to the Ark Encounter. It's wonderful. Highly recommend it. But as they were walking through on the tour of the facilities that are there, they were naturally going back and forth about first one thing and the other. And one of the standout moments for me was when this topic was debated of sorts, even though these terms were not necessarily used. And Ham was pressing Nye about the moral development across cultures regarding various subjects from adultery to murder and even such things as public nudity. And Nye, regardless of the subject, would come back to a certain position over and over and over. And it was that we, a collective, came together and decided that these things were polite behavior or not. It was a decision made by the group. We decided. Now, near and far are relative terms because it depends on where you are starting from, point A, whether point B is near or far from you. And Nye was trying to make the case that the same principle is used to determine moral judgments of the same category. So moral relativism, excuse me, is where the collective or the individual decides what is near or far, good or bad for themselves. Okay, so that's compass number 1. Now, compass number 2 was situational ethics. Now, the ethical judgment here is made based upon the context of the act. And situational ethics, within the context of each situation, it is not universal law that is followed, but rather the law of love. And I'm going to be more specific in my definition of situational ethics. I want to highlight one person that was a pioneer of this particular idea, Joseph Fletcher. He was an Episcopal priest. He was also a member of the Euthanasia Education Council and was also a proponent for and supporter of Planned Parenthood. So he advocated that there was no such thing as fixed law, and that the only fixed law was love. So in any words, any commandment or law or principle could be broken with good conscience if love was the intention. So the ends justify the means. Now, this is a very soft version of what could be a very, and we all know what the hardcore version of this could look like, but this is how permeable this, prominent this is. So if you do something wrong to have a good outcome, then it is okay. That is the definition of situational ethics. All right, so there is a parable in the Bible that Yeshua talks about, that we want to build our houses on the house of our life on rock, not on sand. Well, what's the difference between rock and sand? One is movable and the other is not. Well, absolutism is the acceptance or belief, this is the definition, in absolute principles in political, philosophical, ethical, or theological matters. So if you're on a vacation and you want a reliable road to follow, you don't want a maze, you want to be able to navigate so you can arrive at your destination, and most preferably arrive at a predetermined time when you will expect to be there. It's a very simple concept to understand, that we need a solid foundation for our life, principally, relationally, emotionally, spiritually, politically, and ethically. So we have talked about the movability of this woman that is described in this chapter of Proverbs. Now I want to show a parallel her against another woman that is described. Let's go to the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 1. Verse 9. This is speaking of Orpah. Then she kissed them, speaking of Ruth and Naomi, and they all lifted up their voice and cried. And they said to her, "Surely we will return with you, Naomi, to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me?" And then she explains for a little bit here all the ways that she literally has nothing to offer them at all. And they lifted up their voices and cried again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave to her. I like that word, clave. And she said, Naomi said, "Behold, your sister-in-law is gone back to her people and unto her gods. You return as well after your sister-in-law." And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following you. For where you will go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. And where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." And when she, Naomi, saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left off from speaking to her. She saw that she had made up her mind. And so they went into the town of Bethlehem. And we're familiar with the end of the story. I'm not going to get into that. It's an incredible story that through Ruth's perseverance and high character, she not only brought deliverance to Naomi, but to herself as well. And though she wasn't an Israelite, she eventually became in the lineage of King David and even Yeshua, Jesus himself. So we have one woman here who's steadfastly minded to stay the course on the road that she was on, and then another whose ways were described as movable. I want to read from the Matthew Henry commentary on this particular section of Scripture, just very briefly here. I'm going to read it to you. See Ruth's resolution and her good affection to Naomi. Orpah was loath to part from her, yet she did not love her well enough, key word, to leave Moab for her sake. Thus, many have a value and affection for Christ, yet come short of salvation by him because they will not forsake other things for him. They love him, yet leave him. They love him, yet leave him because they do not love him enough, but love other things better. Ruth is an example of the grace of God inclining the soul to choose the better part. Naomi could desire no more than the solemn declaration Ruth made. And here's the point. See the power of resolution. It silences temptation. Those that go in religious ways without a steadfast mind stand like a door half open, which invites a thief. But resolution shuts and bolts the door. It resists the devil and forces him to flee. Winston Churchill was quoted as saying, "Be a peg hammered into the frozen ground, immovable." And Charles Spurgeon was quoted as saying, "The anvil is not afraid of the hammer." So regardless of what the pressure is that is being put on you, the principle is that resolution steels you against wavering. It steels you against the attacks of the enemy. Now this is what is used principally, what is used in police and military training, from what I have heard from others that I have observed that have been through it, where the training is how to deal with high stakes, volatile situations. The training centers around mentally visualizing and training yourself in that situation ahead of time and preparing yourself what to do in that situation. That way, once you get into that situation, the ground is not shifty. You've already decided ahead of time what to do, even though the temptation may be very great. So in the heat of the moment, you are more likely to do what you have practiced and prepared to do. You are more likely to default to the setting that you have prepared for under pressure. So this principle holds true not just in serious high stakes volatile situations that are used in military and police training, but is true in our moral areas of life. In every area of life, there are going to be pressures put on you from all over. Some are great, and then some are as subtle as social pressures, peer pressures. There was a pastor I heard that was quoted as saying, I was saved twice, once from hell and the second time from public opinion. Forgive me, I don't know, maybe Jerry B. Walker, I'm not sure. But I have a few verses to close with today. So Lord, help us to be steadfast. Let's start in Colossians 2. We're going to read verses 6 through 10. As you have received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk you in him. Rooted. If you're rooted, you're unmovable. I've never seen a tree, except in a movies, walk around. Rooted and built up in him and established in the faith. As you have been taught, abound in it with thanksgiving. Beware lest any man spoil you. That's a military term, to be spoiled by the enemy. Lest any man spoil you through, and he gives 4 things, philosophy and vain deceit, after the traditions of men and the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. So those 4 things are delightful little bunny trails we could go off and talk about for a long time, about how we could be led away and spoiled by the enemy in those 4 ways. We won't get into it right now, but that is fun extra credit work for sure. Verse 9, for in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power. So if you're facing a circumstance that's saying give in to pressure and to turn back, and it's asking you to move your path so you can fit in with whatever the accepted path is, you can be able to say, through the power of the Lord, and look it squarely in the face, say, you're a buck short and a minute late, my decision's already been made. We have to have an absolute firm foundation for our faith. 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, unmovable, always abound in the work of the Lord, for as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. There's reward for being unmovable. Galatians 6:9, let us not be weary in well-doing. Oh, Lord, help me. For in due season we will reap if we faint not. Because not moving takes a lot of strength. And you're going to reap a reward for it. And Ephesians, the last verse, 6:10 says, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. It's going to not be our strength that gives us the ability to be unmovable. It's going to be the power of his might working in us that will make our path unmovable. So Lord, help us to apply this to our lives. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye. And welcome to chapter 6. There are basically five parables of sorts in chapter 6. And we are going to focus on the very first one. And it actually begins in verse 1. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. My son, If you are surety for your friend, if you have stricken your hand with a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken with the words of your mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver yourself when you are come into the hand of your friend. Go, humble yourself, make sure your friend. Do not give sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. So, first we need to establish our definitions. What is surety? Surety means to take or give on a pledge. It's to put up security. It's a dare or a risk to where you're the guarantor. You are mortgaging something or putting up some sort of collateral. It's like primarily understood as a financial type of transaction or agreement. So that is the basic face value surface application. It would be like the modern equivalent of co-signing, for example. And you're never too old or too young to begin learning biblical financial principles. However, we are obviously going to take this principle and take this proverb and see the principle behind it and how else it can fit on a broader level. So, promising something that you may or may not be able to follow through with is in essence the danger that is warned against here. So I believe you can define that, if you want to distill that down into a single word. It's called overcommitment. So the definition of overcommitment, let's see if it fits the definition of what we are comparing it to here, found in our verses in Proverbs. The definition of overcommitment is this: to commit excessively, such as to obligate someone, such as yourself, beyond the ability for fulfillment, or to allocate more resources to a purpose than can be provided, or in excess to the capacity for replenishment, such as to pay a loan that one cannot afford. So, just to make sure we're on track, let's cross-examine where suretyship is explained elsewhere in Proverbs. Chapter 22, 26, and 27. Do not be one of them that strike hands, or of them that are sureties for debts. For if you have nothing to pay, if you don't have it, why should he take away your bed from under you? In other words, what you have put up as collateral. Proverbs 11:15 says, he that is surety for a stranger shall smart or suffer or be afflicted for it. But he that hates or avoids or refuses suretyship is sure. So I think that this fits. Promising something that you may or may not be able to follow through on and reaping the inevitable consequences, I believe we are dealing with the principle of overcommitment. So watching out for overcommitment, guarding against it, goes hand in hand with everything that we have studied so far. It overlaps perfectly. In chapter 1, we talked about pondering our path, the path of our feet. Guarding against overcommitment helps us to ponder the path of our feet and the path of wisdom. It's a natural part of what we studied in chapter 2, where we are learning how to navigate and put up healthy boundaries with friends, and how to be a positive influence and to have responsibility go through our lives. It goes along and overlaps with what we looked at in chapter 3, where we talked about having a good name and being able to win friends and influence people, as the saying goes, and that the best and as best with human consistency possible to be able to follow through on promises and commitments. It is a very integral part to maintaining that good name. It fits in very well with what we studied in chapter 4, where we talked about prioritization, about keeping rocks in our mayonnaise jar that we used as an illustration, a way to make sure that we do not end up with a bunch of sand in our lives instead of the rocks. It goes along and overlaps with perfectly what we looked at in chapter 5, where we keep our path fixed and sure and not movable, where we are diverted from one crisis and emergency to the next crisis and emergency. It is a natural part of being able to focus and clearing the way, just like you would with a machete in the jungle. That's how strong it is to ponder the path of our feet. It goes hand in hand with everything that we have talked about so far. There's a quote, and I don't remember who said it. I really don't. It says that overcommitment is what happens when your enthusiasm for life collides with the reality of your calendar. Now, here's something here. Guarding against overcommitment is for everyone. Now, if you're like me, I could have been born triplets. I have enough interests and things that I genuinely am so intrigued by and want to learn about that it would easily fill the lives of at least 3 people. But if you're not like me and you have a very focused view of your purpose and of your life and what you enjoy, that is perfectly fine. But the same principle holds true, because you can get busy doing anything, but yet still not going anywhere. That is something, regardless of which perspective that you come from, you have to guard against clutter in your life, taking up time that it would be better used other ways. We generally can do just about anything, but you can't do everything all at the same time. There's a quote by James Dobson that goes like this. I'm going to roughly quote it here. What is the biggest obstacle facing the family? And I say that is very applicable for the individual as well. So what is the biggest obstacle facing the family right now? It is overcommitment, time pressure. There is nothing that will destroy family life more insidiously than hectic schedules and busy lives. If Satan can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. And that's just about the same thing. Quote by James Dobson there. Quite a number of years ago, I was in my early teens, took a family trip to California, and we were visiting some extended family out there. And at this family's church, they were putting on a play. And one of the scenes in that play took place in hell. And they had a person playing Satan, and he was sitting on an evil-looking throne. And there were people running around in costumes that were supposed to be demons. And each of the demons were throwing out different ideas of how to get people to do what the devil would want them to do, but ultimately to get them to not do what God wanted them to do. And all of the outright things they knew wouldn't work with people that had been believers for some time and had a little bit of testing under their belt. And then the devil and Satan himself had an idea in the play. He said, I'll get them busy. Doing stuff, but not going anywhere. So we know what the fruits of the Spirit are. All those wonderful things that we need to see in our lives. But there are fruits to overcommitment. You're tired and exhausted. And the greatest of these, the greatest of these is love. Well, the greatest of the fruits of the spirit of stress, is that you are stressed. The fruit of the spirit of overcommitment, the greatest of these is stress. But, as Proverbs says here, we have an answer to it. Today's Proverbs, more specifically, gives us the way out. In chapter 3, it began, "Do this now, my son. Deliver yourself when you are come into the hand of your friend. Humble yourself and make sure your friend. Give not sleep to your eyes, and don't go to sleep. Don't give rest to your eyelids." In other words, it's death. Deliver your soul as a roe from the hand of a hunter, and as a bird from the hand of a fowler. Okay, that's talking about some very serious life and death connotations there. I mean, we've heard a lot of the medical research been done that stress kills. There are many studies that have shown that many diseases and life-ending medical events are stress-related issues. However, there are other life and death issues in a figurative sense that this is warning against as well. I mean, there are many situations in life where it is imperative that we deliver on what we said we would do. Otherwise, it will go very poorly for us. So, the encouragement, the warning in this section of Scripture is to do whatever you need to do to untangle yourself. Get out of the mess, and don't rest at all until you get out. There's further instruction throughout later on in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 3:27 and 28. "Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do it." Don't say to your neighbor, "Go and come again, and tomorrow I'll give it," when you have it with you. WHEN, when you can do it. Galatians 6:10 says, "As you have opportunity," as you have opportunity, "let us do good to all men, especially to them who are of the household of faith." When and as. Romans 13 and 8 says this, "Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loves one another hath fulfilled the law." So, do good when, if, and as you can. When, if, and as you can, to the fullest of your ability, but no more. Obviously, there are going to be situations in life where you are the responsible party, and there's no way to abdicate, to delegate it away. The buck stops with you. However, unnecessary obligations are what this is warning against. Obligations that you don't have to take on. The if, as, and when, one's choice to do so, you have to ponder the path of your feet, as we talked about in chapter 1. Make life easier on yourself. When it is in the power to do so, deliver yourself out of these potentially life and death type of stressful situations. Abstain, decline from it. You really don't have to keep up with everybody. And that's very hard to do in our culture right now. Very hard. Very much a temptation for a great number of people, and I would say for probably everyone to one degree or another. So whatever it means in your situation to get out of overcommitting, that is what this instruction is for. And it is a daily battle. It is not a one-time thing and you're done and you are through with it. It is a daily battle of keeping the rocks, keeping the boundaries in place as we've talked about in our previous chapters, pondering the path of our feet. And as Proverbs says here, it's only just a life and death situation, be it literally or figuratively. So Lord, help us apply this to our lives even right now. And it is by his power and through his power that we will be able to do it. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye.